He kept the watch for 5 years. Not in a drawer he rarely opened. Not in a box in storage. In the desk drawer he opened every single morning. So he would see it. So he would remember. So the promise would stay alive even if the person he made it to was gone. The watch was small. Matte black. One button. No screen. No face. No numbers. Just a single button that, when pressed, connected to a matching device on the other end. A private line. His line. He had given it to her the night he realized she was the kind of person the world could swallow whole if she weren't careful. If you ever need me, he had said, press it. Just once, I'll come. She had taken it without a word, pressed it against her palm like she was checking if it was real. For 1 year, she carried it everywhere. For 5 years after that, she was gone. And the watch was silent. Until tonight. The contract on the table was worth $42 million. Tristan Cole had built the kind of life where $42 million was a Tuesday. He sat at the head of the conference table in the 43rd floor of his Chicago tower, for men across from him who had flown in from 2 different countries, and he was listening to them talk, absorbing, calculating, deciding how much he would give, how much he would take, and how he would make them believe the terms had been their idea. He was very good at this. He had been doing it since he was 19 years old, when he had nothing but a name that nobody feared yet, and the kind of cold nerve that either gets a man killed or makes him dangerous. He had chosen dangerous now. At 38 he ran the most powerful private enterprise network in the Midwest, 3 legitimate businesses, 2 that existed in the gray space between legal and not, and 1 that nobody discussed in rooms with windows. His world was clean lines, controlled outcomes, predictable people. Then the desk drawer began to vibrate. He heard it before anyone else did. A low hum against wood. Nearly nothing, but it detonated inside his chest like a flare fired from a shipwreck, because there was only one thing in that drawer that could make that sound, and it hadn't made that sound in 5 years. He didn't move immediately. He was too practiced for that. He let 3 seconds pass, gave the man across from him a small nod as though he were still listening, then rose and excused himself with the kind of quiet authority that made people assume something important had happened but didn't dare ask what. He walked to the desk. He opened the drawer. The watch lay on top of a folded handkerchief, its small indicator light blinking amber. Someone had pressed the button. Someone on the other end was waiting. Tristan picked it up, walked to the balcony, closed the door behind him. Chicago spread out below him, a river of light running in every direction to the horizon. Cold wind came off Lake Michigan and cut through his jacket. He pressed the connect button, raised the watch to his ear. He waited to hear her voice. He had been waiting 5 years to hear her voice. The voice that came through belonged to a child. Hello? Is anyone there? Tristan stood very still. Who is this? He said, controlled, quiet. My name is Jasper, the boy said. I'm 5 years old. A 5-year-old child had pressed the button. Tristan asked, gently, where Jasper had found the watch. In my mom's drawer, the boy said, under some thread. She looks at it sometimes at night when she thinks I'm asleep, but she never presses anything. She just looks at it. Tonight she went to sleep early because she was really tired, so I paused. The particular pause of a child who knows he may be in trouble. I wanted to see what it did. Tristan walked to the railing. His knuckles tightened around the watch. Tell me about your mother, he said, and the boy did. She was a nurse. She worked early shifts and late shifts and sometimes back-to-back ones when someone called in sick, which happened more than it should. His father, the boy called him Daddy Connor, was sick. His heart? He couldn't work the way he used to, and so his mother worked for both of them and never complained about it, at least not in front of Jasper. They lived in a blue house near a lake Crescent Falls. The town appeared in Tristan's memory immediately, not because he had been there, but because 5 years ago, during 2 years of searching, it had appeared on a list of places she might have gone. A small fishing town on Lake Michigan, quiet, remote, the kind of place where a person could become someone new. He had sent people there. They had found nothing. She had been there the whole time. What's your mother's name? Tristan asked. Rosalie, said the boy. The name landed in his chest like a stone dropped into still water. Rosalie. Jasper, Tristan said, his voice very careful now. I'm going to ask you to do something for me. Can you keep a secret? The boy considered this with the seriousness it deserved. Yes, he said finally. I'm very good at secrets. Don't tell your mother you called me. Another pause. Are you going to come here? Yes. Promise. I promise. The boy's voice brightened in the way only a child's can, like a lamp switched on. Okay, bye then. The call ended. Tristan stood on the balcony for a long moment. Below him, the city breathed and hummed, indifferent as always. He looked at the watch in his hand. The indicator had gone dark again. The connection closed. He went back inside. 4 men were waiting at the table with $42 million between them. The negotiations are postponed, Tristan said. He didn't explain. He didn't offer alternatives. He gathered his jacket from the chair back and walked out. Behind him, he heard the silver-haired man rise to his feet, heard the beginning of an objection, heard someone say his name sharply. He didn't turn around. There are things more important than money. He had never said that before in his life and meant it. Tonight he meant it. Jasper ran like children run when they have seen something wonderful fully. Without reserve, every part of him committed to the direction he was moving. He stopped 3 feet from Tristan and looked up. He had black hair that fell across his forehead, a small square jaw beginning to emerge beneath the softness of childhood. He stood with his feet slightly apart, his hands loose at his sides, and he looked Tristan in the eyes without looking away. Only his eyes were Rosalie's, ember, warm, direct. Everything else. Tristan felt the air leave his chest. Everything else was a mirror. You came, Jasper said. Not surprise exactly, more like confirmation. He had believed the promise would be kept, and here was the evidence. Tristan could not speak for a moment. He was looking at a 5-year-old child and making a calculation he didn't want to make and already knew the answer to. I came, he said finally. The boy beamed. Then another figure appeared on the porch, moving carefully down the steps. A man in his 40s, thin in the way illness makes people thin, his face gaunt but his posture deliberate. He stopped at the bottom of the steps and looked at Tristan with the calm gaze of someone who has been expecting an arrival like this for a long time. Jasper, Connor said, go inside. Give the grown-ups a moment. Jasper looked between the two men. Something older than his years registered in his face. He nodded once and went inside, but not before turning at the door to look at Tristan one more time. Connor stepped forward. Tristan Cole, he said. Not a question. You know me. Every fisherman on this lake knows your name. A pause. That doesn't frighten me. I've faced worse than reputation. He said it without performance, without the inflation of a man trying to seem brave. It was simply true, and they both understood it. Come inside, Connor said. You drove all night. The least we can do is offer you coffee. Rosalie's mouth opened. Connor placed a hand on her shoulder, briefly, and looked at her with gentleness and absolute certainty, and she closed it again. They went inside. The kitchen was small. Morning light coming through checked curtains, family photographs in plain wooden frames. 4 mismatched chairs around a table with a crack running diagonally across one corner, covered by a woven cloth. Tristan sat in one of those chairs, the most powerful man in Chicago, a man whose name made investors and enemies alike lose sleep, and he looked around the room of an ordinary life and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, something that might have been longing. Jasper climbed into the chair beside him and began immediately. Where was Chicago? Was it far? Why did he drive instead of fly? Did he own an airplane? Could Jasper ride in an airplane someday? Did he like fish? Dad, Connor caught a big one last Sunday. Tristan answered every question, shortly at first, then with more words. He watched the boy's face as he talked, the way his expressions moved, the way his head tilted when he was thinking, the way he used his hands. The mirror. Do you have kids? The question came simply, the way children ask the questions that everyone else is avoiding. The kitchen went still. The coffee cup in Rosalie's hand stopped moving. Connor looked up from his mug. Tristan looked at Jasper. I don't know, he said. Connor set down his cup. Jasper, go outside and play for a bit. Take your coat. The boy went, but he pointed at Tristan as he passed. Don't go anywhere. I have more questions. The door closed. The three of them remained at the table. You knew, Tristan said to Connor. I always knew, Connor said, from the day I first held him. He doesn't look like me. He never has. A pause. I didn't need Rosalie to explain. It wouldn't have changed anything. Tristan looked at him. Why? Connor smiled, slow and tired. Because a child doesn't choose who his parents are, and I had already chosen to love him. He stood, refilled his coffee, and looked out the window where Jasper was running across the yard after something Tristan couldn't see. I have about a year, Connor said. Maybe less. The heart. Surgery might change that, but surgery costs what we don't have. He turned from the window. I'm not telling you that for money. I'm telling you because you need to understand the situation you've walked into. He looked at Tristan steadily. I'm going to leave them. I don't want to, but I am. And I need to know that someone will still be here when I'm gone. He walked to the back door. He stopped without turning. There are things that need to be said between you two, he said, to both of them. Say them. I'll be outside. He left. Rosalie stood at the sink, bareback to him, her hands on the edge of the counter, knuckles white. The wall clock ticked. Why didn't you tell me? Tristan said. She didn't answer for a moment. Then, because I found out 2 weeks after I left, you could have called. I know. You could have pressed the button. I know. But you didn't. She turned around. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. She had made peace with this decision, or tried to. She needed him to understand that the decision, even if it was wrong, had not been casual. I lived with you for a year, she said. I knew what your world was. I saw the hours you kept and the men who came to see you. I saw what happened to the people who were close to you and became targets because of it. She looked at him directly. I did not want to raise our son in the shadow of that. I didn't want him growing up knowing how to look over his shoulder before he was old enough to know why. Tristan said nothing, and I didn't want. She stopped. Started again. I didn't want him to learn to be like you. To think that power meant coldness, that control meant isolation, that the way to stay safe was to never let anyone close enough to matter. Her voice cracked slightly. She steadied it. I wanted him to be good. In the simple way, I wanted him to be able to trust people. When Tristan spoke, his voice was low. You took 5 years from me, he said. 5 years I didn't know he existed. I didn't see his first steps. I didn't hear his first words. I didn't hold him when he was afraid. A pause. The first time he called someone father, it wasn't me. Rosalie closed her eyes. I know, she whispered. I know. I thought I was protecting him. Looking back, I don't know if I was right. I only know I was afraid. The word sat between them, honest and small. Afraid? She had been afraid of him, not of his hands. He had never raised his hands to her, but of what his world could do to a child she loved with the whole of herself. He had no answer for that, because she wasn't wrong. She had not been wrong to be afraid. He had just never considered, before this morning, what it looked like to someone who loved him. Then a cough broke the air from the next room. A child's cough, sharp, repeated, each one wrenching harder than the last. Rosalie was through the kitchen doorway before Tristan had even risen from his chair. Rosalie stood at the sink, bareback to him, her hands on the edge of the counter, knuckles white. The wall clock ticked. Why didn't you tell me? Tristan said. She didn't answer for a moment. Then, because I found out 2 weeks after I left, you could have called. I know. You could have pressed the button. I know. But you didn't. She turned around. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. She had made peace with this decision, or tried to. She needed him to understand that the decision, even if it was wrong, had not been casual. I lived with you for a year, she said. I knew what your world was. I saw the hours you kept and the men who came to see you. I saw what happened to the people who were close to you and became targets because of it. She looked at him directly. I did not want to raise our son in the shadow of that. I didn't want him growing up knowing how to look over his shoulder before he was old enough to know why. Tristan said nothing. And I didn't want she stopped. Started again? I didn't want him to learn to be like you. To think that power meant coldness. That control meant isolation. That the way to stay safe was to never let anyone close enough to matter. Her voice cracked slightly. She steadied it. I wanted him to be good. In the simple way, I wanted him to be able to trust people. When Tristan spoke, his voice was low. You took 5 years from me, he said. 5 years I didn't know he existed. I didn't see his first steps. I didn't hear his first words. I didn't hold him when he was afraid. A pause. The first time he called someone father, it wasn't me. Rosalie closed her eyes. I know, she whispered. I know. I thought I was protecting him. Looking back, I don't know if I was right. I only know I was afraid. The word sat between them, honest and small. Afraid? She had been afraid of him, not of his hands. He had never raised his hands to her, but of what his world could do to a child she loved with the whole of herself. He had no answer for that, because she wasn't wrong. She had not been wrong to be afraid. He had just never considered, before this morning, what it looked like to someone who loved him. Then a cough broke the air from the next room. A child's cough, sharp, repeated, each one wrenching harder than the last. Rosalie was through the kitchen doorway before Tristan had even risen from his chair. Jasper was on the sofa, bent forward, coughing with his whole small body. His face was flushed. Connor was beside him already, one hand on the boy's back. Rosalie touched his forehead and went still. He's burning, she said. We need a hospital now. The car, Connor began. I know. Her voice was flat with the particular anguish of someone choosing between problems they can't solve. My car is outside, Tristan said from the doorway. No one argued. Tristan carried Jasper to the car, lifted him without asking, without hesitation, like it was something he had always done. Jasper's arm went around his neck, his burning cheek pressed against the cool leather of Tristan's jacket. In the back seat, Rosalie held him, and she sang, softly, a lullaby she had probably sung to him every night since he was born, in a blue house by a cold lake. When there was no one else to hear, Tristan drove south. He had never driven so fast and felt so slow. Every mile was too long. Every traffic light on the highway's empty on-ramps. A personal affront. He watched the boy in the rearview mirror, watched the way Jasper held onto Rosalie's shirt even as he drifted towards sleep. The grip of a child who had learned, very young, that the people he loved could disappear. Riverside General appeared at the end of a long stretch of dark highway, its red cross blazing against a sky still an hour from sunrise. Tristan stopped hard at the emergency entrance. He carried Jasper inside. The nurses took him through the glass doors and the curtain drew closed, and there was nothing to do but wait. Rosalie sat in a plastic chair, her head in her hands, not crying anymore, just depleted. Tristan stood across the corridor, his back against the wall, his arms folded, his eyes on the small square of glass in the emergency room door. They didn't speak, but he didn't leave. An hour passed. 2. The doctor came out. Pneumonia. Caught in time. Antibiotics already working. Stable, could go home by morning. Rosalie exhaled, so completely it seemed like she might collapse with it. They let them in. Jasper was small in the hospital bed, tubing in his arm, the monitors marking his heartbeat in steady green pulses. His face was pale but peaceful. He was breathing. Rosalie sat beside him and took his hand, and bent her head over it. Tristan stood in the corner of the room. He stood there all night. He didn't sit. He didn't close his eyes. He stood in the corner and kept watch over the boy, over the door, over the room, and Rosalie, who had been watching him not sleep from across the dim hospital room, finally stopped pretending she wasn't watching him. This was a man who could have been anywhere, who had walked out of a $42 million negotiation without blinking, who had resources and people and power at a word. He was standing in the corner of a rural Michigan hospital room at 3 in the morning, watching a sick child breathe. The man she had been afraid of had been real. She knew that. She wasn't pretending otherwise. But this man was also real. At dawn, Jasper woke. He looked around the room in the bleary blinking way of children who wake up in unfamiliar places. He found his mother. He found Tristan. "You're still here," Jasper said. Tristan moved to the bedside. He knelt so they were eye to eye. "I'll always be here," he said. Jasper held out his hand, the small one with the IV tube taped to it, and Tristan took it in both of his. Rosalie looked at the two of them and felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in 5 years. She felt, for the first time, that she might not have to carry everything alone. Jasper was discharged at noon. The hospital bill was paid when Rosalie went to sign the paperwork. She turned to look at Tristan. He was looking out the window at the parking lot. She let it go. On the porch of the blue house, in afternoon light, after Connor had taken Jasper inside to rest, Rosalie and Tristan stood beside the maple tree. The lake was gold. "I'm not here to take him," Tristan said. He said it simply, without pride, without negotiation. "He has a father who has loved him since the beginning. I won't try to undo that. I won't use money, or lawyers, or anything else to place myself above a man who has earned something I didn't." Rosalie looked at him. "I'm asking for a chance," he said. "A small one. I'll come on weekends. I'll let Jasper lead. I won't push." "And Connor's surgery," he stopped her before she could speak. "No strings. Because it's right. Because that man sat across from me this morning and told me exactly who he was without flinching, and he deserves to live." She asked the question she'd been holding all day. "Why did you keep the watch? 5 years. You could have thrown it away." He looked at her for a long moment. "For the same reason you kept yours," he said. She had no answer for that. Because he was right, and they both knew it. He held out a phone. "You don't need the watch anymore," he said. "Call me for anything. Anytime." She took it. 3 months later, Connor had his surgery in Chicago. 6 hours. The best surgeons Tristan's resources could find. When the doctor came out and said the word successful, Rosalie cried in the waiting room hallway until she had nothing left. Connor came home to Crescent Falls. He would need time to heal, but he would heal. 6 months after that, a house down the road from the blue house sold. Everyone in town knew who bought it, and nobody said anything because Jasper ran there every Saturday morning like it was his second home, which it was. Connor taught Jasper to fish. Sunday mornings, dock at the end of the road, lines in the water. The kind of talking that only happens when two people are both looking at the same horizon. Patience, quiet, the dignity of waiting for something. Tristan taught Jasper chess. Saturday afternoons, the small table by the window, pieces moving with deliberate care. How to think past what you can see. How to plan without being cruel about it. How to lose without it breaking you. Once, a classmate asked Jasper who had taught him everything he knew. Jasper said he had 2 dads. One taught him how to be patient. The other taught him how to think ahead. He couldn't decide which one was more useful, so he decided to be both. On an autumn evening, yellow leaves across the grass, the lake going copper in the late sun. Rosalie sat on the porch and watched the 2 men in her life. Connor stood at the edge of the yard, pointing at something on the water. Tristan sat on the dock steps, Jasper beside him, both of them watching where Connor pointed. A strange family, she thought, not the one any of them had planned, but families rarely are. The ones that last aren't the ones that start perfectly. They're the ones that keep choosing each other through the hard seasons, through the silences, through the moments when it would be easier to walk away. Connor had chosen to love a child, not his own. Rosalie had found her way back to a truth she'd been running from. Tristan had kept a promise for 5 years to someone who had asked him not to look. And Jasper, the boy who pressed a button out of simple curiosity, had unlocked something none of them could have found on their own. The watch that started it all sat in a box now. Not in a drawer, not hidden away. In a small wooden box on the shelf in the blue house, between a photograph and a jam jar full of buttons that Jasper collected for reasons only he fully understood. Rosalie kept it there because someday, when he was old enough, she would tell him the whole story. She would tell him about the man who waited 5 years for a signal that came from the most unexpected direction. She would tell him about the father who loved him before he knew who he was. She would tell him about another father who chose him before he was old enough to have opinions about being chosen, and she hoped he would understand what she herself had taken too long to learn. That love isn't a single person arriving at exactly the right time with the right words. Love is people choosing to stay, even when it's complicated, even when it costs them something, even when there is no clear reason to, except that they already promised, and they meant it. He kept the watch for 5 years, and in the end, it was enough.